How can understanding the science of alcohol consumption and sobriety empower individuals?
I think it makes it less personal, and, and I think that we blame ourselves and we feel like it's our fault or that there's some weakness with us. But when you understand how alcohol affects the brain and how it changes the brain, it doesn't make it a you thing. So I think taking that away makes it easier to quit.
As soon as we started, I learned something new. Is that why I know there's a lot of podcasts out there, especially nowadays. A lot of the ones are story based or interview based. Yours is specifically science based. Is that the reason why you chose to delve into the science aspect of sobriety and drinking?
Yeah, I do appreciate people's stories, especially when I get to know them and they're my friends. But I needed to know, like, why me? And that was the most important thing for me when I was quitting. And that's why I gravitated towards the science. I found that that's what helped me more than anything else. And making it less personal so it wasn't a me thing. And understanding like why I was suffering so much and why I kept letting myself down. So then I thought, since it was helping me so much, it would probably help others. And there wasn't really anything like that out. So I filled a need.
Yes. I personally am someone who, and I think most people can relate, before we think about or decide to cut down or stop drinking, there's a baseline understanding that alcohol is not good for us. I think most people can agree with that. So I'm someone who actually avoided delving into the science of it because I knew deep down it would convince me that I needed to stop. So I'm proud of you for jumping into it. It must have been uncomfortable at first too, because I think you started the podcast pretty early in your sobriety, right?
Yeah, I was only 8 months sober, but I started looking into it on day two.
Day two, wow.
So, yeah, once the hangover went away, I started reading about it and learned. So right away, so I was right in the beginning, still very sensitive about everything.
Awesome. There's more probing questions to that, so we'll move on to the next question. And this is a big brain question, probably one of your favorites, but can you discuss the role of neuroplasticity in recovery from alcohol use disorder?
Yeah, that is one of my favorites. So I like to think of it like trails in the brain. The more that we reinforce behaviors and the more that we link feelings and behaviors and situations together, the more carved out that path becomes. And the more carved out the path becomes in the brain, the easier it is to just go straight down it. So, drinking, for example, if you're a stress drinker and you have stress during the day, your brain recognizes that as a cue to drink alcohol. So then the brain releases dopamine to try to motivate you. Dopamine is motivational, it's not a pleasure chemical. It motivates you to seek out alcohol, so you feel a craving. And then you drink and you observe your stress goes away. Now you've linked the stressful situation with drinking alcohol. And when you reinforce that over and over and over and over, it carves out this path that never fully goes away. So when you get sober, we really just have this one path that leads to alcohol, but we can build out other paths that are take a walk, take a bubble bath, call a friend, go to the gym, go to a meeting, go to therapy. And those can become stronger, and the alcohol path can become dusty and overgrown, but it never fully goes away. So, this is why if we convince ourselves that we're cured, we can quickly reactivate that path again and just dust it off and go back to what we were doing before. But neuroplasticity is basically your brain's ability to adapt. So our brain isn't just you have what you have and that's it forever. It adapts and changes based on your life and what you do and your coping skills.
Would you say that's similar to habits? Is it the same neuroplasticity that's happening in the brain? Okay.
Yep.
It's interesting. I didn't know that it never goes away. That can be a little discouraging for some people. How, I guess I want to ask then, for some people who, let's say, have been sober for a little bit and they feel like, okay, I don't really crave it anymore. I don't really think about it anymore. You're saying that the path is still there. So how do we, what are some practices that people can do in order to make sure we don't go back to dusting off that trail?
Yeah, I think that uh, after you take a break, at some point, your mind is going to try to talk you into why your drinking wasn't that bad, and maybe it'll be different this time. You've learned so much, all of that kind of thing. And if you do go back to drinking, you'll observe, maybe you'll be okay in the beginning, but you'll observe you'll go right back to normal, to the way you were drinking before. And that's that path getting reactivated. But as long as you don't drink, the path keeps getting dustier and dustier and dustier. Sure, it never like goes away fully because we can never be like cured. We can never go back to how we were before we started drinking. But as long as you don't drink, you don't reactivate it.
Okay. That's simple enough for me. Just don't. Okay. And as many of you know, I think, Jill, in your community, as well as in the No Booze Crew community, we're all, not all, but a lot of us are doing Dry January this month. So I want to ask a question related to that. Is Dry January worth it from an emotional, mental, and physical perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot of mixed feelings on Dry January, and I understand both sides, but I think Dry January is really a positive thing because it's acceptable. A lot of people do it, so you don't have to worry about people thinking that you're weird or being left out because you're not drinking. Like millions and millions of people give up alcohol for Dry January. So it's very normal. So it's a great way to start and still go out and socialize and everything. And during the month, you're going to have to go through all of your triggers to drink, but then not drink. Like you're going to have work stress. People are going to annoy you. You're going to have anxiety or depression or whatever it is. You're going to have a Saturday that you have to figure out what to do. You'll have boredom. You have to go to sleep. And that I think that learning is really important. And even for the people that go hard on February 1st, you still can't forget everything that you learned for the whole month. So if you go back to drinking and you blow up your life again with alcohol, you'll always remember that experience that you had in Dry January. And you'll see maybe you decided to do it because you had a lot of anxiety or a lot of depression, or you were just sick of letting yourself down. And then in Dry January, you see those things get better. And then when you go back to drinking, you see that they come back. And I think that that's very valuable. I think that we need to see that the consequences come back to really believe that we have to let it go. So I think it's great. The only downside, I think, for Dry January is people that go into it thinking like, okay, I'm here to cure myself. I'm not interested in sobriety. I'm just like surviving until February 1st. I think when you have that mentality, you miss a lot of benefits and you miss a lot of the experiences. You'll still have positives from it, but not as many.
So it sounds like a part of what you're saying is that 30 days is too short.
I think 60 to
60, okay.
60 to 90 is really good. 30 is more for physical benefits. 60 to 90 is more for mental benefits, mental and emotional benefits. And often we're not drinking for physical reasons. We're drinking for a lot of mental and emotional reasons. So you're not really going to get that burst of mental clarity in dry January, depending on how much you drink. If you're a moderate drinker taking a break, like that's a little different. But it takes about 2 months to get the cognitive benefits and to have that clarity. And like when it happened to me, I felt like I came out of a fog. Like I felt like I had been asleep for 7 years and I had just woken up and it was like, what the frick? How is this my life? Like, how did that just happen to me for 7 years? So you're not going to have that awakening in the first month. So even though it is a really good exercise and you do have to live your life without alcohol and get some experiences, you're not going to get those cognitive benefits, which are so important for deciding to let alcohol go for good.
Thank you for that. There is a question that was submitted live, which was, how can I retain my confidence when I keep failing? It just gets harder and harder, and I feel like a failure. So the question is, how can someone retain their confidence when, let's say, in dry January, they keep having slips, or even outside of January?
I think that every time we say we're not going to drink and then we drink, we hate ourselves a little bit more. And our self-esteem gets a little bit worse. And when you do that over and over and over, like it brings you to such a dark place. I was doing that for a long time. And I remember like at the end, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without disgust because I was just so sick of my own crap. And I felt trapped like in someone that I hated. It was awful. And I just kept trying the same thing over and over and over, even though it was not working. I would wake up every day and I would say like I'm not drinking today, and then I'd tell my husband or whatever, and then I would do nothing else about it and then talk myself back into drinking again that night. And I just did that over and over. I think if you're in that cycle, you have to disrupt what you're trying to do and you have to get more support. I think if you can't stay sober and you're trying, it means that you need more support. So you need to call a therapist, you need to join a community, you need to go to meetings, you need to join a program, work with a certified coach, get a sponsor, just something else. And if you are doing those things and they're not working, what I see a lot of people do too is that they'll show up. I think Facebook groups are the best example. People will show up to the Facebook group when they have something going on and they need support, and then they'll ghost. And then and they'll come back when they need support again. But you have to really like integrate into the community and become a caring member on both sides. Like you have to support others and they have to support you to actually feel accountable to the group. Because if you just pop in and out, you don't really care what those people think. Like you don't even know them. So if you are getting support and it's not working, I would also just ask, am I consistently showing up for whatever the support is? But I think it just means you need to do something different because what you're doing is not enough.
This was a tough question because I think a lot of people, including both of us, have experienced a really dark place from breaking the promises we make to each other over and over again, and just being so down on ourselves because it seems so simple, yet we aren't able to do it.
Yep.
Community is my favorite tool, and I just want to highlight something that you said. It reminded me of one of my favorite sayings, which is the best way to stay sober is to be of service to others. And I remember, because I was in such a dark place and I hated myself, that the way to motivate me was to say, this is helping somebody else. So I actually had to use somebody else as inspiration, as motivation. So yeah, that was, I love your answer. Okay. So you mentioned that the things that you were doing weren't working, and so you had to do something different. So, what are some of your favorite tools that helped you the most during early sobriety?
So I will, spoiler alert, I didn't do anything different. Like, I really don't just put it out there right away. I waited and I waited, and it got worse and worse and worse and worse until I hit my own version of rock bottom. So everybody's version will be different. But I waited and kept trying to do nothing over and over and over until it got so bad, like I could not handle it anymore. And I was shocked out of my denial. Um, and then I also continued to do nothing. I told myself, I'm different, you know, other people need support, not me. And what happened was I got really angry and I got very emotional and I was very resentful and jealous and I was pissed that other people could drink and I couldn't. I was mad that this happened to me and I had all these feelings that I couldn't handle. And the first thing that I did that helped on day two, when I was kind of, the hangover was gone and I was coming into my sobriety, I went into Spotify and I searched sober and I found a podcast and I started binging it basically. And that got me through the work days. And then it took me 4 months to start trying to get some support. I was very, very resistant and it kept me unhappy and angry. But my biggest tool was always therapy, because there's a lot of stuff that comes up when you quit drinking. Like I told myself that I drank to have fun, and I just like to party. But I partied in my house alone. That's not really like a party, you know. That's not what most people would think is partying. Most people also wouldn't think that that's very fun. But I thought that I was a fun social drinker. And like sending drunk selfies to people at midnight is not socializing. It's not the same. So I had to learn, like, why was I actually drinking? And that wasn't something that I could learn by myself. The other thing that helped me a lot was walking. I walked like 8+ miles a day when I quit. I just walked and walked and walked and walked because I didn't know what else to do with my emotions. And sitting felt too uncomfortable. So I would just walk. And then treating myself for my milestones and really acknowledging those helped me a lot. Like 7 days, that's a huge deal. 30 days, 60 days, 90, like I acknowledged every single one and I felt proud of myself, and that helped to motivate me. I did keep a little journal of the changes that I was observing. Like every milestone, I would write down what was new and I would reflect, but I threw it away for some reason, unfortunately. So I know, isn't that disappointing? So I would just say, uh, podcast, walking, therapy, treats, reward yourself, feel proud of yourself, community, meeting sober friends like you.
So you mentioned you were binging that podcast when you were getting sober, and Patricia just said, I binge your podcast and they help so much. So I hope you know that now when we're getting sober, many, many people are binging on your podcast.
That's why I made it, because that was what I did. And I thought, I know how scary it is to join anything sober related. You don't know what kind of weird people are in that group. You have no idea what to expect. What if they're all really like preachy and like excited about sobriety and you don't feel great about it? So it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that a podcast was something that you could do alone and you could do it really private. So that's why I created mine. I just, when I was at work in my first month, I just had my headphones on and I just binged sober shows, and no one knew what I was doing, but it signals them like, don't talk to me, leave me alone. And it was really helpful. So I wanted to give that to others.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges, especially in early sobriety is we have so much time that we used to drink. Not only drink, but the times we were hungover. So listening to podcasts, walking 8 miles, that's like 4 hours of walking a day. That's insane. But you did what you had to do to fill those times. So that's really inspiring.
Yeah, I had a lot of time. What else was I going to do?
Yeah. And if anybody doesn't know what rage walking is, Jill, you want to talk about that a little bit? That's one of my favorites.
It took me a little bit to learn that one. Uh, but I mentioned that I was really angry when I stopped drinking, and I was not used to dealing with feelings. I was used to having a feeling, and it felt too overwhelming to handle. So I thought that if I drank, I would make the feeling less overwhelming so then I could deal with it. That's what I would tell myself every time. But really, it just turned off the feeling. And then it would come back even more intense at the end of the night. But I didn't know what to do about feelings when I quit. And I didn't have any support in the beginning besides my husband, who doesn't really get it. He's never really had trouble managing his emotions. So I would try to like just sit with it, which is the advice that you see. And it made me suffer. I couldn't handle sitting with it. Like I didn't know what to do. And the only tool that I had was walking. So I just walked off my anger, and I found that it really helped me. And you walk different when it's a rage walk. Like you really get into it. People probably looked at me like, and anytime, like if my husband and I had a little disagreement, instead of feeling compelled to drink at him, I would just be like, I'm going on a walk. And I would usually call my mom and complain about him on the rage. So I'd get two types of support in one, but it helped me so much, and I still do it. Like when something is really overwhelming, I just walk it off. Or you could rage clean. That's another one people do. Rage cleaning is really effective as well.
I remember this is before I knew you, but I knew about rage walking, and I was talking to one of my community members, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna rage sleep it off. And they were like, well, how do you even rage sleep? I don't know, slam your head on the pillow and just sleep until, no alarm.
No alarm.
No alarm. Nothing. So let's talk about feelings a little bit. One of the scariest parts that I wasn't ready for in early sobriety was that alcohol had numbed so much of my feeling. And if you're unaware of that, I thought that means it was gone. But when I stopped drinking, they came back, and they came back strong. So there was a question here. Is it a normal part of early sobriety to have traumatic memories pop up or very strong emotions that you may not have dealt with in the past?
Yes and yes. Your emotions do actually get, whether you have trauma or not, your emotions will get stronger when you quit drinking for about 90-ish days. Maybe less depending on the person, their genetics, how much they drink, whatever. But that's also why earlier we were saying sometimes 30 days is not enough to see all the benefits because your emotions are going to intensify in the beginning. And that's just because alcohol affects the emotional centers of the brain, it turns them off. And when we stop drinking, the brain is used to existing with the effects of alcohol present. So it's used to kind of like functioning around alcohol, and it's adjusted the way that it operates to compensate for alcohol. So when you remove alcohol, it's not functioning normally anymore. So it like gets all weird and confused and it doesn't know what to do. So things might get worse before they get better. And that time period is when your brain is recalibrating. So things will get more intense. And if you do have trauma or something that you were drinking to numb, that was popping up during your drinking, but you would just drink and make it go away immediately. It's going to continue to pop up in sobriety, but now you can't make it go away. And that's really upsetting. And if you come into sobriety not having the tools to deal with your emotions, trauma memories they can really throw you off. So that's why I always recommend therapy too, because it's hard to process that stuff on our own.
I think that's really, really important because therapy, I have two thoughts. One is that we have alcohol use disorder because what's going on in our brain. And then there's another part, and there's definitely overlap, but there's another part where I have alcohol use disorder because it's become habitual. It's become a habitual pattern to numb whatever trauma or even just uncomfortable emotions might be there. But regardless, I think therapy is so, so important. And there was a question on, and I don't know if you have advice on this, if like how you found a therapist that was maybe affordable for you. If do you know any resources out there?
Yeah, so I can only speak for the US. If you're in the US and you Google psychology today, find a therapist, it's going to bring up this tool and you type in your zip code and then it shows you all of the therapists in your area. And then you can expand the zip code a little bit for a couple miles outside your town. And then you can also filter by your health insurance and who takes your health insurance. So it's affordable. I think you can filter by therapists that offer sliding scales, or it will say it in their bio if you can't filter. You can filter by gender if you prefer female therapist, and you can filter by issue. So you can select alcohol use, you can select trauma, things like that. And then it'll show you all the therapists in your area that take your insurance that help people with alcohol. And that is how I found mine. And then you just email some of them and see the vibe. But that was what
Okay.
I did.
In case anybody missed it, do you mind repeating the website again?
Yeah, so just Google Psychology Today, find a therapist. And the first thing will be that search tool.
I have another science question for you. Are there emerging scientific findings or trends in the field of alcohol research that you find particularly interesting that maybe you're working on a podcast and you want to let us know a little bit of a sneak peek?
I have one coming out next Friday, I think. And something that I'm really interested in right now is our ability to manage our emotions and to be self-aware. Some people, like I always use my husband as an example because he's pretty chill. And something will happen to him and he'll just be like, whatever. And he'll move on with his life. And something similar can happen to me and it really impacts my day a lot. I'm also interested, as someone who likes anger, I'm also interested in people that ruminate on things and want to retaliate, or they get stuck thinking about the other person and what they did. And what I learned is that when something happens to you, you know, your amygdala is going, parts of your brain are going, but then these other parts of the brain activate and they're like, hey, we're good here, you know, this is okay. Let's self-regulate and we'll move on. If you drink a lot of alcohol, those parts of the brain don't turn on. And the more alcohol you drink, the less those parts of the brain engage when you have an upsetting situation. So you just have the upsetting situation and nothing's putting the brakes on it. And that's why some people will get stuck in their emotions, and they'll either ruminate or they'll try to retaliate or something or seek revenge. So that's what my episode next week is all about. But I'm really interested basically in this idea of when we finally quit drinking, we look back and we're like, how did I not realize that was like, why did it take me so long to realize like that wasn't working out for me? So self-awareness and what that is in the brain is very interesting to me right now.
I can't wait for your episode on Friday.
It's a good
next Friday
one, actually. Yeah, next Friday. So a week from today. I was very pleased with what I found.
And everyone here got a sneak peek first. I have another brain question. What's happening in our brains that some people can't moderate or have an off switch once they start?
Similar explanation, where the more that you drink, the more it turns down certain things. The way that I want to explain it tonight is like a use it or lose it kind of thing. And when we're drinking, we only use certain parts of the brain. We use like the emotion centers, and that's kind of it. And the parts that aren't getting used very much get turned down and they can't activate as well and like come online. And when you drink alcohol for every reason, you reinforce a very small number of pathways in the brain, and then the other ones get dusty and unused, as we were saying before. And what happens is there's a path in the brain that input comes in and the brain processes it, and then it's like, yeah, go, let's do it. And then there's another one, input comes in, the brain processes it, and it says like, wait or stop. And that's the off switch in my mind. And the more alcohol you drink over time, that waiting button gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And you might think like, oh, I have to get up early tomorrow, or I said I was only going to have 2 drinks. My boss is here, like I have to drive. You might think these things, but it's kind of a whisper. And the path in the brain that's like, one more is always a good idea, is so loud. And that one usually always wins. And something else that's out of our detection is we fixate on alcohol. Our attention gets really stuck on it. Like if you're doing dry January for the first time and you've been out or you've watched TV even, you're probably noticing how much people drink on TV. And it's like, wow, I never knew that before. When you don't drink, you still have this fixation on alcohol and you can pick up on it. Like I can walk in a room and I'm like, alcohol. I know exactly where it is. And we get fixated on it. And that makes it hard for us to redirect from a craving. So there's a lot of reasons, but the longer that your problematic drinking goes on, the more this gets reinforced, and the more your off switch goes away. So that's why some people might moderate for a while before they start to lose their off switch.
What you just said, that last part, I'm wondering, I've read in books where it said alcohol is like one of those plants that are really slippery, and the deeper the fly gets in, it'll just drop and be trapped. Do you also, based on your experience and your research, believe that anybody, if they drink enough, will become a problematic drinker, have alcohol use disorder?
No, I don't. Um, and I know that belief can be comforting for people to think that this could happen to anybody, and it just happened to happen to me. But I do not believe that anyone can develop a problem. I think that actually most people never will. The way that I see it with alcohol, it doesn't mean that those people won't have a problem with something else. Like maybe they really like gambling and gambling does it for them. But the way that I see it with alcohol is we have risk factors and resilience factors. And if you have enough resilience factors and things in your life don't align, like nothing really horrible happens to you, you're not going to have a problem. I think what we observed with the pandemic is there were people that had some risk factors and they had some resilience factors, and then the pandemic happened and they were all alone at home, high stress, not knowing what to do, afraid. And that situation was like the perfect opportunity for them to start drinking problematically. And then over a year, they lost their off switch. They went past the point of no return. But if that pandemic had never happened, some of those people would have just gone through their life fine. Um, risk factors can include things like who your spouse is. If your spouse doesn't really drink, then it's harder for you to drink. You still can, but if your spouse likes to drink and party with you, so much easier to have a problem. If you have a very high stress job, it makes it a little bit easier. If you grew up and your parents modeled coping skills for you, that is a resilience factor. So that's protective because now you've learned some tools to cope. Some people just are more sensitive than others to emotions. If you have anxiety, that's a risk factor. Any trauma in your life, that's a risk factor. That changes the brain. There's a question, how do you define a problem? A problem is when you obsess over your drinking. And a problem is basically anyone that's not a take it or leave it drinker. A take it or leave it drinker is someone who doesn't care either way. They can drink or not, and it's whatever. A problem drinker is someone that's going to have cravings, someone that's going to have mental gymnastics. Should I drink? Should I not? How much? How do I make sure I don't have too much? Any of that is problematic. It's not a frequency thing and it's not a quantity thing. It's just the way that you think about it. So yeah, I don't think that anyone can develop a problem.
I think one of to relate to what you were saying, one of the things I was really shocked to see is I don't know if anyone else here has also taken the alcohol use disorder, I don't want to call it a test,
The
but
audit.
the audit, yeah. There's about 7 to 9 questions, and I was shocked because not a single question asked, how much do you drink? How often do you drink? So I think nowadays we've moved away from problem drinking becoming what we typically see on TV and whatnot, and now it's more about, is it causing a problem for me? Yeah.
Yeah, wise words there.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was really. I mean,
This is a little bit redundant, but I'm going to ask it regardless because I questioned myself multiple times. Can I ever become a moderate drinker? You shook your head before I finished that question.
no. I don't want anyone to ever have any hope. You cannot moderate ever. You're done. And if you can just let the hope go, you can move on with your life and be happy. Alcohol is not required for life. The AA saying is like once you turn a cucumber into a pickle, like you can't turn it back into a cucumber. There's like this invisible line that we cross, and then you can't uncross it. Like once alcohol has changed your brain enough, some of those changes are permanent. Like the pathway that we were talking about, it gets dusty and unused, but it's always there dormant. You can reactivate it. It doesn't mean that you have to suffer for your whole life, but it just means that even if 20 years goes by, you will still drink the same way as you always did. You might moderate in the beginning because you had such a long gap, but you'll go back to normal drinking for you. Because we're not choosing to not be satisfied with one drink. It's not a weakness thing. It's not a choice. It's just the way that our brain works. We get obsessive and we can't stop once we start all the time. And we can't take our attention off of it. And that stuff, because it's not a choice, you can't change it.
I really wanted to ask that question, and I know that I think it's episode 99 in your podcast, Why I Can Never Drink Again. That specific episode stopped me from going back to drinking. So if you are curious, everyone, check out episode 99. When you start hearing that voice, like maybe I can moderate, promise to listen to Jill's podcast first before.
I'm actually working on an episode right now. I'm so torn on it, and I'm done preparing for it. I just have not recorded it or taken the next step, but it's about weight loss. And I know that's so triggering, but I'm coming at it with the perspective that the more that you obsess about it, the more you're going to go in the exact opposite direction of what you want. And I'm not just saying that to say it. Like I have actual studies to share that back up what I'm saying. But I talk about the obsession and how it can go away with food. But then I mention that I'm like, don't get any ideas because you still can't moderate. Go listen to episode 99.
I am Jill, the hope destroyer.
Seriously. No hope.
I think it's very important that you're honest and transparent about that part, because somebody like me, especially, I will justify and find reasons. Like when I was questioning my drinking, I Googled, am I an alcoholic? And I only read the articles that told me, no, you're okay. Like there's always something online that's on your side. Like you can justify anything.
And there's more now that's on your side. So much more. Like I would have been so doomed if I was struggling right now, because there's so many people that will take your money and try to teach you to moderate. And there's so many different like resources and all these new strategies that you can try and things that you can read. Like it would have taken up a lot more of my time to pursue it. So I do want to destroy that hope for everybody so that they just move on.
Yeah, because I did try everything I possibly could. And when I had no other options, that's when I quit
Yeah.
drinking. So at least there's also a lot more resources out there that tell you the truth as well.
Yeah, when I was going through it, I kept thinking like people for thousands of years have been trying to figure out how to moderate and no one has. Like my rational brain would come in and try to be like, "What do you think about that?" But then I'd be like, "Nobody tries as hard as me. I'm gonna I'm gonna figure this out." So I would always undo it. But yeah, I did think about that sometimes, like that millions and millions of people over thousands of years have been trying to learn how to moderate, and no one has before. But it didn't impact me.
Well, you're sharing it, and hopefully it may land with some people. Okay, we have already at 50 minutes, so I'm going to skip a few questions. We'll stay on this topic. I know that you have done a 90-day sober challenge when you first started, but you went back to drinking. Why why did you go back to drinking after 90 days is part one of the question. And part two is what made you finally say, okay, I'm done?
Uh, so I did the 90 days because I was really, really suffering. I had huge amounts of anxiety and I would be awake at 3 a.m. I would force myself to stay awake from 3 a.m. to about 7 a.m. thinking about what a freaking loser I am. And I would shame myself for hours because I deserved punishment for not being able to moderate. And then I would get up and I would try to get ready for work, struggling to even look at myself because of the disgust. And I used to tell myself every morning, like, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, like, till I made myself cry in the mirror. Like, and people think that drinkers, they just like to have fun and they only think about themselves. Like, that was not fun. And then I did that for a long time, like maybe a year. I lived like that. And then in my middle of the night wake ups would get scarier and I started to get really suicidal. And I would think these awful things, like how my husband doesn't deserve this and how can you put him through this. I won't go, you guys get the point. I won't go into it, but I realized one night, like, this is scary. You could do something about this. And my husband used to sit up with me for those 4 hours when I was making myself suffer. And he would try to comfort me and get me to go back to sleep. And I remember we were watching the sun come out after I kept us up all night with my crap again. And I just looked at him and I was like, I can't drink for 90 days. And I didn't think about it. I just said it because 30 didn't feel long enough. I didn't know why. Now I know why, but it just felt like it wasn't long enough. 90 felt long enough. And by long enough, I don't mean long enough to see the full benefits of sobriety. I mean long enough to cure myself.
Yeah.
It was my last effort. I thought that if I could do 90 days, I would reset my tolerance. I just had a very high tolerance. I had a bad habit. It was a routine. And if I could just do 90 days, like I would be fine and I'd be cured. So I went into it with that intention, and I didn't do anything to try to help myself. I just didn't drink for 90 days. And I tried to negotiate it back a couple times for special occasions, but they weren't special occasions. It was like, we're going to the casino tonight. How can I not drink at the casino? Like, that's not a special occasion.
How can I? It's free drinks. That's a special occasion, right?
See, you get it. You get it. And my husband was like, no, you committed to this. Like, I'm not going to drink with you. So I did the 90 days, and halfway through, around like day 60, actually, I realized, oh my God, if I don't drink, I'm not going to feel suicidal. Oh, I don't have to feel that way as long as I don't drink. And I did what a lot of us do. I got a tattoo to represent that knowledge. The anxiety was gone, and I started making those connections around 2 months. And also around that time, I realized that day 91 was my birthday. And it was fate. Like, the universe sent me a sign that I could drink on my birthday and I was going to be cured. And the 90-day challenge was like, oh, like I was doing the right thing. And I drank on my birthday and I got wicked drunk. But then I moderated after for 2 months for the first time ever in my life. And then after that, I descended right back down to normal, and I couldn't get back out. And then every single consequence that I had, the all-night shame session with anxiety and scary thoughts, all of it was right back in my life, right away. It took me years to get to that point, but it only took a couple months after the break to get right back to where I was. And I tried so hard for 4 months to come back out of it and to control it. And then I realized again, like, you're going to do something about this. Like, this is really bad. And even though I hated myself for it, like, I knew that I didn't want something bad to happen to myself. It felt like I was two different people almost, like battling against each other. And like literally the same thing. We were sitting on the couch after an all-night shame, scary thoughts session, watching the sun come up. And I looked at my husband and I said, I can never drink ever again. Same, like exactly the same copy paste moment. I just said something different. And when I said never again, I felt afraid, but I also felt a lot of peace because I knew it was over. I knew I didn't have to suffer anymore. And like, I didn't want to not drink, because that sounded sad and boring and like my life was over. But I also felt hopeful that I didn't have to suffer that way anymore. And that was like all I could cling on to. Yeah.
I just want to say it's really courageous of you to be so vulnerable about your story. It can't be easy to show the darkest moments of your life to others so that, in hopes that it will inspire them. But I think it's so important because when people see you, listen to your podcast, you look like someone that's living a life that's unachievable for those who are in early sobriety or haven't stopped drinking yet. So to know where you come from, like, I know a lot of people can relate to at least the feelings that you had right before you decided to stop. So I just want to say I really appreciate you for sharing all of that.
Thank you, Andy.
Jill, we have 1 minute left. So let's end off off by saying, what's next after dry January? And any tips that you want to leave the No Booze Crew community before we sign off?
I obviously encourage you to keep going after dry January. I don't think anyone's surprised that I say that. If you are someone that is very committed to drinking on February 1st and trying to moderate, then I would just encourage you to pay attention. And I want you to pay attention over the next like 10 or so days that we have left of dry Jan and notice what isn't in your life anymore consistently. And notice how you feel about yourself. And then if you end up drinking again, I want you to pay attention to those same things. I think unfortunately we just need proof that the suffering is going to be exactly the same. But if you are open to continuing, then I would get excited about the mental clarity that you can have at 60 days. Like it's so awesome. And you're going to be shocked. Like you feel good now, but just wait until you get that mental clarity and your brain comes back on and you wake up. It's so great. And if you're not doing anything for support, I really encourage you to get support because you don't have to suffer with very intense, unmanageable emotions. One of my clients asked me today, have you always been this calm? And no, I was very easily flustered, so easily offended. Like you could offend me, like
just by staring at you, right?
So easily offended. I took everything personally. I was always heated. I always had a crisis. And now I am very calm. And that's all because of sobriety and learning how to manage emotions. So that's available for you too. But you have to seek out help to manage those emotions. That knowledge isn't just going to come your way just from not drinking. And rage walk too. You should also rage walk.
Thank you for answering all those questions, Jill. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everyone being on here. I know it's late for some of you. It's way past Jill's bedtime. So sincerely from the bottom of our hearts, Jill, thank you. And good night to everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.